talking about Pfizer saying the early analysis showing that COVID-19's vaccine is 90% effective, which is an astonishing number, a much better number than was actually expected. What does it all mean? What does it mean for the other drug trials? Where do we go from here? All that kind of stuff. Dr. Dean Fanelli joins us, and he is somebody who spent decades in pharmaceutical and biotechnology IP management, including technology licensing, transactions, due diligence, prosecution, and litigation. And the focus is on pharmaceuticals and chemical-related technologies. That's what he has worked with, certainly in his career after graduating from a school that I almost went to, George Washington University Law School, and he got his PhD in organic chemistry from Temple University after getting his BS in chemistry from Villanova University. So he's kind of from my area of the country, because those are a couple of schools very near where I grew up. Dr. Fanelli, thanks so much for popping on.
Good to join you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so what does this mean, first of all? When you heard this, and I guarantee you heard this early, too, what was the first thing you thought?
Well, I was pretty shocked at how high the number was, because in the summer, if you recall, the FDA put out guidelines, and they were saying they were looking for a vaccine candidate that had 50% effectiveness. So here we are, the news has been coming in, and it's continued to be positive. And this is really positive. 90% is just really higher than I think most people expected.
Yeah. From the legal perspective, I mean, there's got to be all kinds of things happening with this, because it's, okay, how fast can we do this? How quickly do we distribute it? But that also means lots of agreements and all kinds of things that are out there in the ether that have to be pulled together, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this has been going on for quite some time. This is really unprecedented. They're actually making and manufacturing the vaccine now, so that once it's approved, there won't be that lag time. And in addition, we take for granted when we get these vaccines, but think about, the hundreds of millions of doses of this. We need all the glass vials, the syringes. So all in the background over the past several months, the agreements, as you mentioned, have been getting put into place, as well as the logistics of rolling these out to the states once they're approved.
Yeah, and that includes, and that's why I mentioned some of your background, because then you look at the licensing, the transactions, all of that kind of stuff, because what is the fear on the other end of this is litigation, the possibilities of what can happen, because it's warp speed as fast as possible. So they have to have some protocols that are put into place, right?
Absolutely, and the government's really trying to roll this out. Been planning this, and it's coordinated with amongst many agencies. So this is going to be coordinated not only at the federal level, but at the state level. I mean, when you think about some of the advanced candidates like the Pfizer and the Moderna candidates, especially the Pfizer has to be kept at minus 80 degrees Celsius. So that adds to the logistics. Then also the Pfizer and Moderna candidates are both two-shot candidates, so you have to have someone get their initial shot, come back 3 or 4 weeks later, get that second shot. So a lot goes into this aside from just manufacturing the vaccine.
Yeah, and when we say about the 90% effective, of course, there's there's anti-vax people, but there's other people that are very wary of getting this vaccine, thinking, oh, it's so fast. And even though, we have these different drug makers and they're talking about exactly what happened, the development, is there going to be a problem with that? Do you think there's going to be people that are just absolutely not going to do it, because then you look at the effectiveness?
Yeah, absolutely right. So, I mean, I think there is a problem. I would have liked to have seen some type of publicity campaign, that was just basically teaching people and educating people on what the process is, even though this has been sped up. It's safe. And as you mentioned, the 90%, we're going to have to get to a certain threshold of immunity amongst the nation to, put this thing to rest. So, if we were at a 50% number, it just makes it that much more difficult. So that's why this number is really just very promising, although it's still, to keep it in perspective, preliminary, and, it's going to have to be looked at in the context of the rest of the data that continues to come in.
Right. So while this is good, and I think there is a reason to celebrate because we need it, right, with this pandemic, because we're seeing numbers soar, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that doesn't mean this Pfizer vaccine does not mean that the pandemic is coming to an end. Certainly not today. It's that it might move up that timetable depending on how this all plays out, right?
That's correct. So Pfizer CEO said they'll try and apply for what's called emergency use authorization in a few weeks, about the week of Thanksgiving. And if that's approved, we could see potentially the vaccine on the market before the end of this year, given to, high-risk people, as you can imagine, healthcare workers, those with certain high-risk conditions.
Yeah. Wow. All right, Dean, thanks so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you hanging late with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Wow, this is big news. Like we said, and he fleshed a lot of this out for us. I mentioned the FDA giving I mentioned the FDA and the antibody treatment. They're giving an emergency okay to Lilly's antibody treatment for COVID-19. And the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine news does absolutely bode well for other vaccines. So that's great because all the things can get into place, hopefully faster. And I'll tell you what, it's just good to get that ray of good news, because this is the conversation that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. When, how, what's going to happen? What about this? And what about our future? And what's going on? And we've lived under this big question mark, and we're still going to live under that question mark. But once these protocols get rolled out, and I agree, and which is why I asked Dean that, what about the publicity side of it? What about pushing it out? What about pushing the how-tos, why we have this, what's going to happen? And I think that will happen, because the more information that is scientific, the more that you can decide, look at it, I think the better for people not to look at this and think, whoa, how safe is this? Is this going to make a difference? I mean, is this going to make a dent in what's happening in my neighborhood, the neighborhood around my family, my family that lives across the country? And what does it mean for one neighborhood versus another neighborhood? I think it's good news. I think it's really, really good news, because that number is much higher than originally was thought was probably going to happen. So jumping on that and the kind of tests they're doing, I'm going to say, absolutely 100%. We should all feel pretty good about this and take it for what it is, and wait and see how much more we know as the days and the weeks and the months, etc., roll out. And what does that mean personally for you? What does it mean for anybody listening on the front lines? How is this distributed, and how soon will you get it? All of that is right there on the front burner, as they say. On the front burner, because it's terrible, of course, what's happened with the amount of people that have gotten COVID-19, with the amount of what we're seeing in the fluctuation in the cases in this now new wave. 239,000 people in the U.S. have died. 10.2 million cases. If we roll that into what's happened worldwide, 50.8 million cases, 1.26 million deaths, and 33.2 million recovered. Seeing that number of recovery soar, seeing more people not getting in the situation where they have to be hospitalized, there's no beds, they're in parking lots being given oxygen, and scrambling, the frontline workers scrambling to help people survive. So good news in a very strange couple of weeks that we've had, not just when it comes to health, but certainly when it comes to the politics of the day. And what are the politics of the day? We're going to get to that coming up. Plus, all of your comments. The mailbag, not surprisingly, was full. Once again, a good time for me to remind all of you who are listening, no matter where you're listening to me, you can always reach out 24/7, of course, by going to Kate at KateDelaneyRadio.com. Shoot me an email, Kate at KateDelaneyRadio.com. Walking down to that mailroom, I'll meet you there.